Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We have our full opinion maker panel this week, starting with some folks that are first time on the show. Judy Baker, former state legislator, ran for statewide office. Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Great to be here.
Brianna Lennon, attorney. Welcome back. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
The center of the news. We'll get right back to that, though. A friend of the show, Representative Tracy McCreery in St. Louis. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be back.
And former state rep, first time on the show, Jim Avery. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the biggest news in politics this week. The special elections, it's been an interesting thing that there was a very competitive House race in a Republican seat. Senator Will Kraus resigns. Candidate, Democrat nominee Shields, Searport on the Republican side. But there's a third person on the ballot that our Kansas City viewers will know. Jacob Turk ran for Congress many times. You were the attorney that kind of came in and helped guide him back on the ballot. Tell me what happened.
Well, the first thing with these kind of lawsuits, they're so tight in timeline. So, you know, Mr. Turk was looking for an attorney, called me on Saturday morning, Monday before the trial, and I had spent a lot of time in the Secretary of State's office doing this kind of law. So
So how long had you been in the Secretary of State's office?
I had been there for 3.5 years. I am now in private practice.
Were you work for Carnahan, work for Candor, or both?
For Candor.
Candor. Got
Although
it.
I had interned for Robin Carnahan. So
I
I
understand, yeah.
I just have a deep place in my heart for elections.
Sure.
So that's what really drew me to take this. The independent candidate process is very voter-centric. It's very direct democracy. And what was being alleged was that those signatures that had been signed on the petitions were not valid.
And so since the Republicans wouldn't nominate him, he went and had to get signatures to get on the ballot.
Yes.
And the signatures were in question. And it looks like at the end of the day, he needed 629. And by the time you were done, he had 629.
He did.
Amazing coincidence, I guess, right?
It was a tricky situation because it first went, once he submitted the petitions to the Secretary of State's office, goes to the Jackson County Board of Elections. They had an opportunity to go through, check signatures, take whatever off, and through that process, they were actually getting letters from the attorneys that ended up being the attorneys for the plaintiff in the case to continue being more to delve down more into whether those signatures should be taken off. So they started challenging them even before the lawsuit happened. So at the end of the day, when they certified, we only had a few that we could lose. And so when we went into the trial, the plaintiffs put 10 signatures into question, and we ended up having just enough to be able to stay on the ballot. But it was dicey for a little bit. We actually finished the trial, and no one was quite sure if the judge had actually given us enough signatures. So, so there was a lot of debate afterwards because he didn't say at the end, and Mr. Turk stays on the ballot. He just said, here's my ruling, and then he left.
So Judy Baker, I mean, to me, you have a qualified Democrat running. You have a very qualified Republican, the floor leader in the House, Mike Searport. I think this is the sign of Democrats actually getting their act together. So now you have the guy that could never win, but he'll take votes away from the Republican, making the race close. I mean, to me, this is a sign of Democrats getting their act together.
Well, if that's a sign to you, that's a good thing. I'm glad that you feel that way. I think that it's good for democracy to have everyone on the ballot who qualifies to be on the ballot and give choices. So, you know, I think that you've got some really good choices. It's going to be an exciting race. I mean,
I think
the traditional candidates, you know, and the traditional parties are both great candidates. You know, I'll be supporting Hillary because I know her and
Sure.
trust her, and I think she'll make a great candidate.
I mean, that district's been represented by a Republican the last few cycles. Probably started off with the advantage to Mike Searport and the Republican. Now that you have another kind of fringe candidate to pull from the Republican, it makes it, like you said, makes the race very competitive, right?
It really does. Yeah, it
Jim,
puts it in play.
I was so glad when you were on the show this week because I see so many times in Jeff City, folks talk about politics like the Republicans could never lose, like it's an invincible, always going to be Republican supermajorities. You remember when there was not Republican supermajorities, when there were Democrat majorities, and you had to fight hard to win districts. This is the kind of stuff Republicans did. You go get the crazy fringe candidate that would never be elected. You stick him on the ballot to cut the Republican margin. This is what Republicans did when they were hungry and in the minority.
It is. So I actually came in on the first class of the Republican majority. But, you know, I worked prior to that, helping Republicans get elected.
In a tough district back then.
In a tough district. The first district I ran in, I got 47% of the vote, but it was only a 40% Republican area. So, you know, I had to work hard. I didn't win. I decided that I was going to do it again, and luckily the district boundaries changed. But,
Sure.
you know, when we first came in with the majority, we still didn't have a huge majority. So every vote counted, so you had a little bit more power as well. But this is a common tactic to put, and I'm not saying that that's the situation here. I'm sure that this gentleman wants to run and win.
Sure.
But it is always nice for the party that's not necessarily going to win when they have two people from the same party fighting it out. So there's definitely an opportunity to steal a seat away.
And in an age where you have, this happened once in that district before. There was another candidate filed, the Democrat won. That's kind of the last Democrat, I believe, held this seat. It is an interesting thing, and you do have some Republicans now. Tracy McCreery, you've had to serve when it was sometimes hard to get Democrats to turn out. Now the Republicans have all levers of government, and we've seen it be hard for them to get turnout. Now you have a scenario where, let's just say, I will say, Jim, I think it's a sign of Democrats being aggressive, and I think Stephen Weber's brought some of that aggressiveness and some of those smart tactics. I think you've been in these type of races. This is definitely going to help the Democrat, and maybe some folks in Jackson County Democratic Party deserve a tip of the cap.
Well, I don't think the Democratic Party had anything to do with it initially. I can speak personally. I ran as an independent back in 2011 because I don't think the process of committee men and committee women picking the Democrat and the Republican candidates necessarily picks a candidate that's a good reflection of the district. So I will say that. But I think overall this is more of a reflection of how voters are kind of, they are attracted to people that are independent. They are, you know, Greitens ran and won as a political outsider and not a career politician.
Jacob Turk's run half dozen times.
Well, whatever, but I mean, you know, his Republican opponent's been in office for a long time, and he's, you know, the floor leader on the Missouri House of Representatives. So, but I think the bigger picture, what it shows is a fracture in the Republican Party. We saw that play out this week with the primary in the South between Luther Strange and Ray Moore. You know, there's like the establishment Republican candidate, and then there's sort of like a different kind of Republican running. So I think this is a what happens when a party might get too big for its britches. You see a fracture within the party.
Very interesting. So going forward, is there a lesson folks that want to get on the ballot can learn from the election process that you just brought?
I think there's a couple things, and then an independent candidate race, you need to get as many signatures as possible. Jacob Turk started out with over 800 signatures, and that got whittled all the way down to 629. True. So if you're looking, don't just look at that 2% number that you need to have. You need to go well beyond that so you can have a cushion. The other thing, if there is a challenge to it, I think what this case especially showed is that it's a very high bar to get signatures taken off the ballot. Petitions are presumed to be valid under the law. So you really need to prepare, you know, your case. You really need to have this kind of factual evidence, like voters that are coming in that are saying that's not my signature. I mean, we've seen these kind of cases before for initiative petitions. They've always been weeks and weeks and depositions, and this was a 4-day long, you know, hour-and-a-half trial. So I think this was a little unusual, but it does show the kind of preparation you need to have.
Let's talk about a candidate that won't need any Republicans to help her get on the ballot, and that's Nicole Galloway. She officially kicked off her campaign. There's a part of her that's just very likable.
Exactly.
She seems obviously competent, but she just seems like the kind of person you'd want to run into on the street and have coffee with.
Exactly. Yeah, she is likable, but behind that likability is the type of work experience and education that makes her a great auditor. And voters through the decades have said that they want their auditor to be a CPA. And Nicole Galloway is not only a CPA, but she's also a certified fraud examiner. So she's like above and beyond a CPA. So she's got the whole package.
You know Nicole Galloway well. You ran for statewide office. Now, she's in an interesting spot. While she's been a statewide office holder for a few years, she's never won a statewide election. What does she have to do to whittle the numbers down? Is it whittle them down in rural Missouri? How does she win the race?
I think she's taken this opportunity to do an outstanding job, and so people trust her. What I think will happen in the electorate is, you know, the feeling out there is very much like what Tracy said. People want an independent. They want to know that they've got a good watchdog, especially in that position. When you've got all one party ruling, it's actually probably in their best interest to have another party as the auditor. And I think that will give her the edge in the election. She'll be the watchdog they're looking for.
So, an interesting race. Her qualifications, clearly qualified to do the job. And I think most folks think she's done a fine job as auditor. How does she separate her race if it just happens to be a big Republican year? Is there a way to even do that anymore? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts for her.
Well, I know her track record because I live in Boone County. She was our treasurer for a long time, and her track record, I think, is what sets her apart. Really, is she has a reputation for being very even-keeled, very good at delving into every particular issue with her audits. And so she's very fair. She's audited both Republicans and Democrats. And I think it's that independent streak and just the quality of her work that's going to set her apart.
Jim Avery, everybody thought the speaker was going to run, and the folks thought top tier candidate, great. A lot of folks have turned to Senator Kehoe, probably the most respected person in state government. Where do you go if Senator Kehoe doesn't make the race?
That's a good question. I guess that's going to be a question to see who emerges if he decides not to run. And it might be a good opportunity for somebody that's an up-and-comer that's not well established to
So you have a Paul Kurtman from the St. Louis area that's talked about running. You have a businessman, David Wassinger from the St. Louis area, that's talked about running. He is actively running now, actually. You kind of look around. The Republicans have a big bench, but you don't have a front runner now.
Right, and it's hard not having somebody that's an actual CPA.
When do you need When do you need somebody to step up and say, I'm definitely in to make a competitive race?
Well, I still think it's early. I don't think you have to have it right now. But I think in the next 6 months you need to have that person, and I'd like to see the party get behind that person. I'd love to see Paul Kurtman, who's I'm a big fan of his, not only because he's a conservative, but like myself, he's a former Marine. So
prediction time, though, if I was Nicole Gallo, I'd be like, yeah, I'd rather have Mike Kehoe not run against me. Do you think Senator Kehoe runs?
I think he does, yeah.
Do you think he runs? Tracy,
No.
I don't think he runs
I don't
either.
think he runs.
You think so? What do you think?
I'll go with the majority here.
What do you think?
I think he doesn't.
Yeah, I just kind of think something about it says he just isn't ready to do that. I also think he thinks this is an important year in the Senate. And it is true, you can't be as effective of a floor leader of the Senate if you're running for state auditor.
Right.
But we all know that everybody has aspirations.
That's true, yeah.
You know, where does he go from the Senate if he doesn't take this opportunity now? So
It's a great thing about politics is
Right.
we'll know in March, right? And we will talk about the conclusions of the St. Louis protesters, and the Democrats have a health care plan, right,
Yeah,
of their own.
It's an awesome plan.
And we'll
Yep.
talk about it. We'll talk about it right after this.
In 2008, Republic Services acquired the Bridgeton landfill in a merger. Since then, we've invested $200 million to clean up the site and to maintain environmental compliance. We do that while staffing the facility 24/7. That's because we support permanent solutions that are safe for our neighbors and clean up the environment. We're committed to doing what's right. That's what drives us every day. We're a part of the community, and we are here for the long haul. Republic Services. We'll handle it from here.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Nobody likes power outages, including us. That's why Ameren, Missouri is investing in new equipment and smarter technology to reduce outages and keep pace with future needs. And it's working. We're in the top 25% in the nation for reliability. And on average, our rates are 18% lower than other Midwestern states. Making sure the power is there when you need it. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. We convinced our panel to stay around. And Tracy McCreery, the Democrats now, you're getting Republicans on the ballot, you're hustling, you're running close special elections. Now you have a health care plan. What's
We
in it?
do. Well, it's called Healthy Missouri, and the Democrats hit the road this week. We were all over Missouri, not just in our usual places like St. Louis and Kansas City, but we were in Hannibal, Kirksville, laying out a proactive plan that will actually give Missourians more health choices and options and actually reduce costs. It's a great plan.
It's an interesting point you made up. Stephen Weber can go to Kirksville, and he doesn't look weird and
Right.
stick out. He's a guy that he's served in the legislature, but he's a veteran, and Stephen Weber can talk to people.
Right.
And he doesn't seem like some guy from the city here to sell you a pig in a poke or anything.
Exactly. He's the real deal, and the Democratic Party's lucky to have him.
Jim Avery, it's interesting. You saw Republicans come out and start competing in places they didn't back in the day. Now a health care plan. I wonder if people are going to ask how they're going to pass it, though.
Well, I mean, that's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and they're not going to pass it because they don't have the votes.
Yeah.
But, you know, I looked at the Democrat health care plan, and there were some things in it I thought that were okay. But then there was something that really caught my attention was they want to limit gifts to doctors. We can't even get the legislature to limit gifts from lobbyists. I don't know how we're going to limit gifts. It just doesn't make sense to me. So.
Good point.
So what do you think of the Democrats? It's an engaged message. It is going to different parts of the state. Is this a sign of some life coming back into the party?
Yeah, I think it appeals across the board. I mean, you know, in Boone County where I am, we have huge racial health disparities. It's addressing that. It's addressing the opioid crisis. I think it's really hitting all the high points.
So what is actually in this healthcare plan?
Well, there's 8 points to it, and it mostly goes around access and quality, and they focus on veterans and the access for veterans particularly, which is a crime that we don't have really good access and opportunities for veterans to get the health care that they need. They have, you know, a whole lot of different things that I think will address the cost issues, and that's the most important thing. You know, we talk a lot about who pays for health care, but we don't talk near enough about the cost of health care and how to bring that down. So they talk about the pharmaceutical plan, you know, to make pharmaceutical companies more accountable. So I think there's a lot of things in there that are going to be attractive to the voters.
Do you think it's a way that you can cut through? I mean, right now the issues around Obamacare and the Republicans' failure to get rid of it despite 8 years of promises they would eliminate it. They've done nothing to do that. I mean, that's got to demoralize Republicans.
Absolutely, because they've been running on that for 8 years now and promising so much and then unable to deliver.
Jim Avery, people have been running for county recorder on I'm going to get rid of Obamacare. They've promised it. People loathe it. They hate it. I mean, it's socialism shoved down your throat. They get in office, they do nothing. How do you motivate a Republican voter after all this?
Well, I mean, I'm a Republican voter, and I can tell you it's demoralizing when you have a House and a Senate that, and like you said, even the dog catchers have run on it. I think our current governor ran on it. Somehow he was going to change Obamacare, but, you know, you can't promise that you're going to do something, and then when you get the votes to do it, you do absolutely nothing to do it. So it's a tough deal for the Republican Party nationally.
Let me ask you a question, Tracy McCreery. Put me in the group that just wants, should the government do X? No, God, just stop. But there must be some popularity to Obamacare, or the Republicans wouldn't support it.
That's a good point. The voters, when the voters speak, that's why we're not able to get the repeal of the Affordable Care Act to happen. And part of that is it would repeal like lifetime limits. It would say that if somebody had pre-existing conditions that they could be charged more. You know, a lot of us were born with pre-existing conditions. So, you know, we have to find a way to make things fair and affordable. And back to the Healthy Missouri plan, I agree with what you're saying in that some of these things that we're talking about, any place outside of the Missouri House of Representatives or the Missouri Senate, these things are bipartisan or nonpartisan. It's just like good healthcare options. So it's only when things get into the building that it turns into.
But it comes down to who pays for it, right?
Well, this plan is revenue neutral. Actually, revenue positive. We have not put anything in this plan that will actually cost money. So if we
Is that assuming like a Medicaid expansion?
it is, but also the part I talked about a lot yesterday in Kirksville has to do with, not Kirksville, Hannibal. It has to do with if we get back into the federal family planning program, it brings $9 million back to the state of Missouri. Right now, we're paying for it with state state money. We're leaving money on the table. And it's not just for access to contraception. Contraception is not controversial, but it's also access to cancer screenings, STD testing, that kind of thing. Why are we paying for that with state money when we could be doing it with federal money?
But when the voters in Boone County had a choice between a candidate that would expand Medicaid in Stephen Weber and a candidate that wouldn't in Caleb Rowden, they chose Caleb Rowden.
Well, Boone County still went for Stephen Weber. It's
But
that,
the Senate
that,
district,
that
is my
the
point.
district goes beyond that. But the big thing here, I think, is that now, I mean, healthcare's been in the public eye now for the last several months, and people are really activated about it, and people really want options now. I mean, they're looking for these kinds of solutions that are provided in this.
But at the end of the day, I mean, the popularity amongst people in Missouri that elect their politicians, if they expanded Medicare, they'd be out of office. Or Medicaid, I'm sorry, they'd be out of office, right?
I don't know that that's particularly true now. I think things have changed. I think there's been a huge shift in how we think about it and how we're looking at it. The plan that the Democrats put together this week actually is going to be a nice complement for what I think is going to go forward at the federal level. I mean, we're looking at, Graham Cassidy is dead, which gives opportunity for Alexander Murray, which is the bipartisan look at healthcare. And I think the president's behind a bipartisan solution, and it sounds like the Congress might be as well. What's the most important thing here is that in healthcare that we don't sabotage it anymore. We've got a free market system, believe it or not. ACA is built on free market ideals. It was never allowed to be competitive because of the sabotage that was done with it. So people want a stable marketplace with competition, and the Lamar Alexander Murray bill is very possibly going to do that. So it's stabilization versus sabotage.
Is there any chance for a Billy Long, Jason Smith repeal Obamacare bill to pass? Just roll it back and actually have capitalism? Is that at all possible?
We had capitalism for the last 30 years before ACA, and it was not working. It was not solving the problem. We still have competition in the ACA model. It's just not been allowed to have full competition because of the sabotage.
Jim Avery, is there any hope for the Billy Long just repeal the dadgum thing bill to pass?
No, I think they've tried that, and it hasn't happened.
Did Republicans lie to people when they said they would run and repeal this and then they didn't do it? Is that a lie?
I don't think it's the truth. I don't know that it's a lie, but it's definitely not the truth. And I think that base Republicans, the people that go out and do work for people, aren't happy about it. So this will be an interesting election cycle to see how people react to the fact that they couldn't get it done.
Let's talk a little bit about the protests in St. Louis. We're now into the third week. There's still large groups of people getting together, sometimes disruptively, like at a mall in St. Louis where the cops have had to intervene. But they finally last night came out with a list of demands. The mayor resign, this judge be removed, the interim police chief be fired, and then a couple things we've talked about, which are they said they don't want body cameras now, but they do want the Civilian Review Board to have subpoena power, and they do want outside entities investigating police shootings. The last two seem somewhat reasonable. What is the future of this, and will there be anything actually come from this?
Well, I hope so, because I do think that the protesters were well-intentioned. It's their right to do what they want to do. A lot of us were frustrated when things got violent, but I don't think, I had friends that were out there. They weren't the people causing problems at night with vandalism and that kind of thing. But, I think this is a bigger picture. I'm glad the demands came out on Thursday night, or their wish list, but the bigger picture
This is not Lyda Cruzen's fault, though, is it?
It's not. She's a new mayor. She just got sworn in, a few months ago. But what we have to do, and yesterday or on Thursday I was in Hannibal, there is inequality everywhere. This is not just a St. Louis region problem. This is an issue about economic inequality and injustice, and there's a lot of things we need to address. It's not just about the police. It's about, depending on what county you grow up in or what zip code you live in, you have different access to health care and education and a whole gamut of things that improve your quality of life.
And one of the lists was removing a judge. I mean, you're clearly been in the courtroom this past week. You don't demand judges are removed based off one ruling. That seems out of the scope of what's a rational idea to think about.
Well, it certainly happened in other states before. It's a very extreme option, and it doesn't happen very often at all. But to Tracy's point, I mean, these are issues that are all over. I know Columbia has started a series of community policing engagement meetings, and not just because of what's been happening in St. Louis, but because this is something that has been a conversation for a long time. It's been a problem and institutionalized for a long time.
So, I mean, I think it's very good, and it shows the professionalism and the maturity of a Bruce Franks to come forward and say this is a list of demands. Some of them, frankly, I think, Lyda Crewson wasn't the mayor when this incident happened. She had nothing to do with appointing this judge. She was just duly elected by the people of St. Louis. But some of those policy things, I wonder why the Board of Aldermen doesn't just do them.
Well, I think they have opportunity now because an agenda has been laid out. I would add one to that, and that is more and comprehensive de-escalation training. I think what's happening across the entire nation, not just in St. Louis, but we've got situations where you have mental illness or someone who's stopped for a traffic violation should not get a death penalty, and there's a lot of mental illness, and there's a lot of training maybe that we have pulled back on that we need the resources to do.
Jim Avery, I mean, you look at the Board of Aldermen, they just honored a heroin dealer. I mean, I think most of the state mouth just drops and wonders, this is how you got here, is decisions like this.
Yeah, I think, so I know we're not to that point yet, but I think the winner of the week is heroin dealers in the city of St. Louis. When you can be a heroin dealer and the city honors you with a resolution, which is the highest proclamation that they can give somebody, it's beyond common sense. And then the fact that there was an alderman who wanted to give a resolution to police officers, and that's being dubbed as controversial, that's the problem. So I don't think you should honor a heroin dealer. I think it's unfortunate that he lost his life, but honoring him is not sending a message. So to me, the people against the city-county merger, those are the big winners, because nobody in the county wants the stuff that's going on in the city. We don't want that. We don't want resolutions for heroin dealers.
Tracy McCreery, I've learned a lot from Jamal Nasheed, Bruce Franks, and other folks. I see some of their points. You can see their points and engage with them without honoring someone that died trying to sell heroin.
Well, Representative Franks and Senator Nasheed are not part of the city Board of Aldermen, so I do not want anyone to think that was their doing. But my understanding of the resolution was that it was more about showing respects to the family, that it wasn't about the person. But back to what Judy Baker said, he should have been tried in a court of law. He should, if he's truly guilty of dealing heroin.
I understand what you're saying, but we do have to say who won the week, though.
Oh gosh, who won the week?
Yeah.
Claire McCaskill won the week because her opponent lost the week, and then some.
That may be true. Who won the week?
Jacob Turk.
I think that's true. Who won the week?
Oh, I think definitely Hillary Shields. I mean, she's got a real shot at this.
Very good week for her. I'm going to say Steve Stinger. He was able to effectively keep businesses from being shut down. And if you want to protest, you can. Proved it. And we will see you next week to pick this conversation up on This Week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.